Hello everyone, this is the full speed TinyLeader. Featuring F4 flight controller with an OSD, 8-amp 4-in-1 ESC with connectors. The VTX is the FSD TX600, which is power switchable from 25 milliwatts to 600 milliwatts via smart audio. Featuring full speed branded 1103 11,000 kV motors, 40mm props, an XT30 for your battery connection, 3D print for your battery holder, can be purchased with several different full speed micro receivers. The HD version has the Cadix Turtle V2. The TinyLeader weighs 45.5 grams. The TinyLeader HD weighs almost 56 grams. Motor post to motor post, I'm getting 79 millimeters. Carbon plates 1 millimeter. As we're watching the flight, I'm going to talk a little bit about something that's not specific to the quad, and that's just about flight in general. So I have had the TinyLeaders for about a week, maybe it's even 9 days or 10 days, and I really have focused on flying them heavily, but I had 3 days that I was just bad, and it actually felt like my nerves, or I was compounding this feeling of being too excitable or stressed about the fact that I was not flying well. And you know, you kind of get to a point where you start to think, oh, it's just a quad, I'll go back to something that flies better, so to speak. And so I tried several different quads, and I wasn't any better. So then I kind of had to come to that moment where I thought, okay, it is me, it has nothing to do with quad, I just stink. The good side of stinking is you get lots of crash reel footage, and I have beat this thing up in the house. I've focused in the house. It's been cold outside still. We did get a couple of days where it creeped up to almost 50. So most of my indoor flying was done during the course of this time. I did spend about an hour and a half total flying outside, and one day the wind was blowing, and it must have been 25 miles an hour. It was just a feeble attempt or a poor excuse to go outside and fly, because it's just not flyable in that sort of wind. I ended up having to pick it up out of a bush and whatnot. But the moral of the story is sometimes we just don't fly very well. I'm thankful that I finally got to the point where I kind of self-realized that, hey, you know, you just need to relax and quit trying so hard. And I think the reason is, you know, this time of year we have a lot going on. You've got to get Christmas ready. You know, we've got kids, and so we've got to make sure the presents are all wrapped, and we've made sure the budget has been met, or it has an even distribution of budget funds for the Christmas and an even number of Christmas presents. If it's not, you know, how do you even it out? Is it something that the older kids should know? The travel that you have coming up, the getting ready for a vacation right after Christmas. So I think it just had to do with the fact that all those things were kind of building on me. And so for 3 days, it's not as though I didn't enjoy flying, but I was getting frustrated. But you can see here that we do just fine flying the TinyLeader inside the house. And as per usual, I get a little bit better later in the pack than I do in the beginning of the pack. I am using a G&B 300 milliamp 2S battery. These have been kind of hard to find. Rotor Geeks has them. I do see that Banggood recently listed them as well. A little wave to the crowd. So our outside flight here, and in this flight I try to show kind of a couple different aspects, because again I didn't have a lot of time outside flying. It is kind of a cruising aspect where I do kind of some laps along the house or the fence line and whatnot. I go through the little area here closer to the house quite a bit. I also try to do some of those quicker turn scenarios so you can see how the machine responds in those scenarios. I did tweak the tune a little bit. It comes with a tune, but for me it wasn't quite right. There's a certain sort of stick feel that I need in order to be able to fly in the manner that I I want to fly. So I did tweak out the tune, and when we get back to the desk, I'll show you those PIDs. There's a 3S flight I'm going to show directly after this that I think it's important to see, because this is the first whoop that is 3S capable. But there's a couple of things I have to mention there. Is one, Lewis sent me a 3S battery to try, so I have no idea if this is a good battery or not. The word on the street is that G&B is making a battery that is 3S and should be 300 milliamp and will fit into the TinyLeader, but you know, I haven't seen it yet. We have no idea if that's going to be a good battery, or if it's going to fit, or if it's going to be crazy heavy. I will tell you right away, when it comes to flying on 3S, there is a difference in stick feel, but you lose quite a bit of efficiency carrying that extra battery weight. But this is one thing, you saw a little bit of a washout there. I'm not certain that was all the machine. That might have been a little bit of pilot error that when I came around that tree in the back. But this one is kind of revolutionary in the fact that this is the first time we've seen a tiny whoop, or a whoop vehicle this size of 75 millimeters that has a full micro camera and a full VTX and technically a full flight controller and a separate ESC. So when it comes to parts replacement, you can replace all the individual pieces and not have to buy a whole new board. Or you might be able to keep one on hand because full speed parts are readily available. But we're gonna go into the 3S flight here next after I crash land off the table there. Voila. Okay, so you can see there in the bottom left that we have 3S voltage now, and this flight is not going to be very long. My recollection after watching the footage back is we're looking at well under 2 minutes, and it does feel different. I can't argue that it doesn't feel different. When you turn corners fast, you do feel the extra torque of having that ability to just pump more voltage into the motors, and they respond a little bit differently. I don't think your PIDs will need too much adjusting going from 2 to 3S, but I would suggest looking into that a little bit. You see right there already, low battery. We're just killing this battery. So I don't know how good this battery is. I wouldn't base your 3S flight times or really even performance based upon this. I've only got the one battery that'll work, and I don't know what kind of shape it's in. And quite frankly, I've seen a few of the videos that Lewis has made, and it seems like that they go way below what I would go for battery voltage. And that's something else I should note, is I changed the cell minimum and cell warning on Betaflight on mine just to meet my needs, so that when I disarm, that it comes in at over 3.5 volts, or really close to 3.5 volts for cell, because that's what I'm looking for in my batteries. Now, my PIDs on 3S, I didn't tweak these. I've only been able to fly this battery twice, and again, this is the only battery I have that will fit inside the machine. So I'm not even going to post the PIDs for 3S yet. When I get back from vacation, I will try to post those, or I'll try to work on the tune a little bit more and post those PIDs there afterwards. And another crash landing off the table, and I forgot to disarm. Now this is a sample of the TinyLeader HD. This is only a sample. I did not spend much time working on this. Unfortunately, because of our travel plans and the holidays, I didn't have a whole lot of time, but I know some people are going to be curious, so I tried to get done what I could in the time that I have. If I have more time, I think I have a small window of maybe an hour tomorrow. I'll post some more footage. I'll either include it in this edit if I have that time, or I'll link it down below in the description to a separate posting. This will give you a sample of what it's like to fly in the house. This is our outside flight in HD, and I was pretty pleased with this right out of the box. Again, I haven't hardly tweaked this tune. I've done very, very little work to it to make it fly like I want it to fly. I just threw on a couple of packs and went out, and again, I am using the same G&B 300 milliamp 2S battery. And I kind of like going fast here. I kind of wish the sun was a little bit higher. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know a lot about how to make, flight footage when it comes to HD or something like that. Maybe I just need more color. But this is give you a sample of how it flies and how long it flies with the HD setup, which is, as you saw in the quick roll, quite a bit heavier. But that shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. We have a bigger camera, a lens. We've got the wiring harness that comes from the camera to the board and then the board itself, and a little bit of wiring to the board to power it and get the video in and out. Let's take a listen to the audio so you can hear things. I am going to depress the audio a little bit so it doesn't blow your eardrums. I don't know why I started doing that back and forth bit, but I did. Maybe I had a beat in my head that I just couldn't get out. But I don't see any jello, but I also don't think I'm very discerning when it comes to that sort of thing. Sometimes I can see it when it's really bad. But I'm going to crash right here. I'm going to just bury it in the ground. Ooh! You can hear me laughing in the distance, but that's a little sample. So let's go through a couple things that you're going to need to know right out of the box. So the receivers come loose like this, and I don't suggest you leave it that way. I would suggest putting some foam in there and securing it to the back of the camera, but doing that after you bind. If you get a FlySky or version with the bind button, I think it's intelligent that they left it out there because you can squeeze the bind button, which is right there. Hopefully you can see it at the end of my screwdriver. So that's your bind button. Squeeze that with a pair of tweezers, but not hard, and then plug in a battery while keeping it squeezed. It should go into bind mode. You bind that to your radio. If you're using DSMX, please follow their instructions. That is not a prop cut, that is a paper cut. The VTX, hopefully you noticed during the quick roll, it's on the bottom, which is very interesting, and actually kind of complicates one thing. I located it here earlier. So it comes locked, so out of the box you're not going to be able to run up to 600 milliwatts. You have to unlock the VTX, and you can find the instructions on Fullspeed's website, and I'll link it down below. But to unlock it, you have to press this button. Dang it, now I forget. So if I can locate the antenna, I know it's on the other end. Yeah, there it is. Okay, now I don't know if I'm gonna be able to show this on camera, but the button you have to depress to unlock the VTX while plugging in power is right down here. Now I was able to do it. Hopefully, can you see that at all? It's right here. It's right at the end of my screwdriver. I'm actually pressing the button in right now. I was able to do it on this one. The button's a little bit in a different spot on the HD version. What I do to do that, or what I did, was I used some of this, sorry I bumped the camera, I used some of this blue tack, and that sticks this end down, so that then I can take one hand and push this button in, and I think I actually might have secured this down, something like that. Blue tack, not the real blue stuff. The real blue stuff made by Loctite is not nearly as good as the blue tack that's made by Bostik. So blue tack, and it's gray. This stuff works great, and you buy a little package of that and it'll last you a really long time. Don't throw it away, just keep reusing it. Anyways, so I have this secured down so the quad won't twist away from me. I have this secured down, and I would position it a little bit differently so it's easier for my arms to reach. But then I would plug in the battery while I had this button plugged in. So I get it pressed, and I plug in the battery, and then it unlocks it. I believe that's the instructions. That's what I did. I did that right out of the box when I first got it, and I am running 200 milliwatts on this one, but 25 milliwatts on this one. So obviously we've got a lot going on. We've got an extra board. We've got quite a bit of extra wiring. If you look around this side, the microphone's tucked into the antenna hole. We have a little bit of a different structure here at the rear. Usually that is just one standoff, like you see on the standard Tiny Hawk. So pretty ingenious how they managed to get everything in there. But you do have lots of wires coming and going, and that's something that you're going to have to decide if you're okay with. But generally speaking, I think if you want a micro this size and you want a turtle in it, it's going to be a little bit of a wiring mess. You're asking a lot to get everything in there until they come out with these boards with pins, and then some people aren't going to want that. So you're going to have to make a decision about that sort of thing. I will draw your attention to, before we get to the VTX, this is the wiring for the camera. You know how it comes in those real, well, you can see them down here, those little tiny wires, and there's a whole bunch of them. They've wrapped those up so that they're kind of tidy and out of the way, and you can see they've run them underneath the Caddx Turtle there, the board, and up to the camera. So that should stay out of harm's way. But again, I think we need to secure down the receiver that we have for our radio. In this case, I would probably do something similar to what I've already recommended, which is just some foam. It's going to be kind of fiddly, as it is with a lot of micros. Use some foam tape. I would probably just secure it to these boards on this side. So we've got our flight controller on top, then we've got our ESC down here, and then we've got the Caddx Turtle, and again we've got the TX 600 here on the bottom. The VTX runs from 25 milliwatts all under 600, and the button This one you can actually see it a bit clearer, or maybe it's just because I'm getting light in there. Hopefully I can get my camera to line up. I'm going to try to position everything perfectly and zoom in. I don't think you can really see it, but there's an edge that I can see in the screen. Hopefully you can see it, but there's the button. Oh, you can't see it, my thumb's in the way. The button's right down there. Can I point to it from the other side? I can't reach it from the underside. Maybe that gives you a better idea where to look. That area just above my screwdriver, that's the button for the TX. You can reach it. I just didn't unlock it on this one. I think I just kind of forgot to do that. So with everything they've got going here, it's pretty ingenious that you can still reach the buttons that you need to reach. And you might be asking yourself about the recording button on the Caddx Turtle, and yes, you can reach that. I have this, one of the kids' watercolor brushes. I don't know why I needed to, but at one point in time I shaved this end down a little bit so that I could do something particular, and it's turned out to work quite well because I've got a flat end here. But the recording button is right here. Hopefully you can see that. And so I just use this little guy. I press that. It comes up. Now the downside is in the FPV view, the Caddx Turtle information has not been turned off, so you see that in your OSD, and if you want to turn that off, you've got some work to do. They do not include, at least in the kit that I got, the items that you need to connect to the Caddx Turtle and to change turn off the little call sign there that says caddx.us, I think it does, and then you have your voltage, which comes through the Turtle as well, and there's one other item to the right, and I forget it now, but you saw it in the video that I put right up here. You can't get rid of that stuff as it comes out of the box. You've either got to have that equipment or you've got to acquire it. And basically, it's just a little controller that you plug into this, and it doesn't cost very much if you have to buy one. I think they're less than $7 or $8, but that's one more thing you have to be aware of. It is the version 2, as I mentioned in the quick whirl, as can be identified by the microphone that's plugged in right up there. You get a nice shot of the lens. It is a much larger lens, and I thought the video turned out pretty good, even though I wasn't able to spend that much time flying it. I thought it flew relatively well for something that, with 3S it's going to fly a little bit better, I think, but again, I didn't have time. And I apologize that I didn't have time, but I know a number of you have been asking me about this review, and I think you want to see it. I'm going to get it out before I leave, because I think otherwise some people might be sorry or upset with me. So you might be better off flying 3S on this one, but I'm not certain of that yet. And that would only be if you want more aggressive flight. I think flying this one inside, because of the additional weight, is going to be more challenging, especially if your space is my size or smaller. Then you got to have the skills to do that, so that's something that you're going to have to judge. If you're flying in big industrial spaces and that's your inside space, you could probably manage this. Or if you're wanting to go very slow and you're wanting to be more scenic or cinematography sort of filming, this is a pretty good candidate, because, I don't know, you saw the footage. You tell me. The footage looked pretty good. I know my colors this time of year are terrible and it's kind of all gray, but the footage, do you think it's something that you would use? Is this something that you're interested? And I think if you are interested in something like this, even if you're not buying right away, you should leave a comment down below. My gut feeling, because Lewis mentioned this once, that getting the HD version might be a limited run. So if you're wanting a HD version, I hate to say it, but if you're wanting this one and you like what you've seen so far, I would go ahead and look to purchase. You can also wait until they maybe get some of these stateside. I think Good Venture Drones is the official full-speed U.S. supplier. I wouldn't be surprised if we see these at S&N Hobbies. I'm sure Grayson Hobbies will have those. Depending upon the popularity, we may see them picked up by other shops as well. But Lewis did mention that he thought the HD version would be a limited run. So if you see them up for sale and you do want one, I wouldn't hesitate. Of course, for inside flying and more aggressive flying, I do think the TinyLeader stock is going to be a better fit. I do think it's, as I mentioned in the flight footage, pretty interesting that they went with a full-size camera. Now, one thing to know about the Caddx cameras, and Andy RC has pointed this out to me. Thank you very much, Andy. And he's very discernible when it comes to image. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I don't do cameras. I don't think I'm very good at doing cameras. But one of the things I noticed in my time with it is that there is dirt or something inside the sensor, and from crash to crash, from flight to flight, it will move around. So it seems like they're putting the cameras together in a facility that isn't all that clean. And by clean, I mean like, bunny suit sort of clean. You get a little speck on a sensor, and next thing you know, you have a problem. But my camera has a couple has a couple specs inside of it, and you may have noticed that. But it actually got worse, and it got better from flight to flight, so it's moving around inside there. That's something to be aware of with these Caddx cameras, is that I have seen that. I haven't seen it in the HD version, but I have seen it in a couple of different cameras after Andy pointed that out. So that's something that you should be aware of. If you buy one of these and you find you have a spot in your FPV view, that there's probably nothing you can do about it, but it'll probably move around, and every once in a while it'll move completely out of your view, or it might clear itself. I don't know why that is. I don't know what's going on for certain, other than that's my experience. Also on the assembly here, you'll note that there's no standoff here and there's no standoff below. That's by design, because they've gone kind of with a shifting of 45 degrees with the different components. We have the TX 600 down here at the bottom that's shifted. It connects to this standoff, and then the ESC board and the flight controller board connect to one another, and they're connected down here through these two screws down here. So you have the TX 600 connected via this, that, and that. Right? Yes. And then you have this supported, the ESC and flight controller supported by these two studs, nylon standoffs on each side. So hopefully you can see that. I know we're talking tiny stuff here, but I wanted to make sure that that was apparent, so that if you have any questions about it, that when you get yours, it won't be a surprise. Now, as you can see, my props are beat up. I got one fresh prop on here. This one right here, and that one's fresh. Kind of one of my last flights in the house, I actually shredded a prop. This is the first time in all my inside flight I'm doing that. When I say shredded, it means I pulled off the inside bit. As you can see there, there's nothing to put back on, and it was actually a little bit of a struggle to get it off the stem, but I was gentle and went slow and was able to get it off and not damage the motor stem. Also the hoops, fairly interestingly, I had a couple of crashes on the day I was able to fly outside. It was 49 degrees Fahrenheit, and I saw a chart online that somebody had sent me. It's actually a motorcycle chart, like at this speed, at this temperature, what the actual temperature is, or the feeling of the temperature is, so that motorcycle riders would know what to wear to keep their body warm. And it was fairly interesting. I won't quote that to you now, but you can look that up online if you want. But when these things are in movement in the air and traveling at a certain rate of speed, even though it might be 50 degrees, the temperature, because of the wind on the material, might be, just say for the purposes of this video, 40 degrees. And I was a little bit surprised knowing that it was only 49 degrees, and I was flying the heavier version, and I crashed a few times, that the ducts didn't break. So let's take a little closer look at the ducts. I'm sure many of you will be interested. Of course, these are the parts that screw to the frame, and we've seen this before. The Rack-On 66 and the Rack-On 76 that we did about a year and a half ago, they affix to the frame the same way. But what is interesting is, hopefully my camera will pick this up for you in a way, is that right in here is kind of a divot. It doesn't come straight down, and this isn't all flat right here. It actually is kind of curved in the mold right here. And you can tell from this it's curved as well. And then it also flares out and around. So we really don't have any straight parts on this. It just kind of comes around. The straightest part would be down here at the bottom. But everything else kind of curves down and curves around. There's no real straight edges. And I think that's probably a pretty wise design. So far, I haven't had any problems with any of my struts breaking. I did want to show you one of them I left. Please pause the video for a moment while I find this. Where'd it go? Oh, right here. So this is the most dramatic damage that I had to any of the hoops. And you can see that the motor still spins freely and the prop does not strike. So yeah, hopefully it's clear what I'm talking about. I'm talking about this strut. I'm calling it a strut. There might be another name for it, but that's what I'm going to call it. So you can see how this guy is really bent up here. But the prop still spins just fine. You can actually fly like this just fine. It won't give you any problems. I've actually got another one that's over here that's a little bit wonky, but you can just straighten these back out. Just kind of bend it back the other way, and next thing you know, voila. Now the plastic does show some signs of stress. You can see the darker white spots because it's kind of a translucent color. So the white spots indicate stress. You see we've got this one over here is a little bit wonky as well, and I'll bend that back. But what's interesting is that doesn't snap or break. You may have seen the video of Lewis doing this. Whoop, flew out of screen. So it's going to bend up and it's going to get stressed, but at least in decent temperatures, it shouldn't just snap and break. I would think another good thing to possibly do if you do end up with one of these that is showing some signs of stress or that it may break would be to use some heat on it. I've heard that sometimes you can use heat on plastics and that will somehow make them more sure. Also, you can take some welder and you can coat whatever area you think is going to be subject to breakage. E6000 is also recommended. People use tape. They put tape around the edges. I don't think these are going to break unless you have a real extreme crash. The long and the short of that is I don't think that's going to be an issue that these are going to break. I think it's going to take a lot of crashes over time to actually cause much of a damage that'll make you want to trade them out. But the nice thing about this design is it is a benefit. You can replace individual ones. You don't have to replace the entire frame. So that design does have that benefit. So while we're talking about durability, I should mention the fact that I didn't have any issues with screws coming out from the screw points on all the hoops. So, you know, your experiences may be different than mine. I know there are many people who are going to have these and fly in various ways that I'm not flying and crash in ways that I haven't crashed, but my experience has been very positive with the durability of the TinyLeader, both the HD and the standard version. I do think one thing that we should do is to secure our battery lead down probably right to this carbon. You can see it's a full area right here. We could zip tie this down, and that is going to keep our battery lead from pulling out, and that's going to be important for long-term durability as well. You can do the exact same thing on this one. The problem with doing it the way I'm describing is that when you use these batteries, and this is the battery that I mainly flew, I used a lot of other batteries, and I'll show them in a minute, but you can see this is a high volt battery, is that when I put this one in here, and I'll just show you real quick, get it about where I wanted. I had to go up this way, and you see how now I need that extra room up here. So if my battery lead was secured down to the carbon, you know, you could probably still do it, but it's going to be more fiddly. So you're going to have to make some choices there. And with the heat shrink around this thing going this way, which is another way I looked at going, which is back through here. See if we can get this done real quick. I felt like the battery had to be too far back in order to do it this way. See how it's not quite long enough? Now on some batteries I could do that. These are Nanotechs. I have a bunch of these and I recently bought them, and I'll do a quick battery video coming up, but basically don't get these if you want them to last a long time, and that's an opinion, or you want a really high performing battery. These are the 40 to 5 to 90 C. I also have the matched cell ones. I'll also have the lower C ratings. These do fit and they will work just fine for inside flight, but I think if you want to race or you want to fly a little bit longer, this is the battery you should use. But this battery is a little bit heavier, but I felt it performed better and it didn't have as much sag, especially at the end of the battery. And this also comes with a JST, but these batteries can be quite cheap. That is one benefit. And Hobby King is sells batteries to a lot of different locations, so if batteries are hard to get, this may be the battery that you'd have to go to, and it does fit in our little slot just fine. The dimensions are pretty much the same as this one, but because this one has a longer lead, I could just run it this way and plug it in, and it works out just fine. So that's, whoop, a little far back there, but you know, that's, I think I have 15 of the 45 to 90 Cs. I only have 6 of these. You can get these from Banggood. I'll put some links down below. I think Rotor Geeks has those. These aren't readily available in a lot of places just yet. This is a very, very new battery from G&B, so they can be hard to get. And as far as the 3S flight that I was flying, this is the battery that I was using. You can see that that's a custom battery. But basically what it looks like is we have 3 1S batteries that they've put together, and they've done their own soldering. So you can choose to do that as well. I'm hopeful that when we get a 3S battery from G&B that maybe it will be a bit smaller and a bit lighter. The gauge of wire that we have on here is quite thick. I don't think we need quite that much, but this does fit in here. It's a little bit of a stretch with that TPU mount, but it does go in, as you can see, and it flies just fine, but I'm just not certain if this battery is actually been well taken care of. But it does seem to charge just fine, but you know, again, I don't know who makes it, and I can't recommend it because basically you just have to make your own. Maybe it's G&B 300 cells, the 1S sticks, and they've clipped off the ends and put them all together. I don't know. I didn't ask, but I would definitely recommend getting some of these for your 2S power whoops. Also, outdoor flight, you can squeeze in the G&B 450. Let me show you that one. This one is an especially difficult stretch because it's a little bit thicker and a little bit wider. Well, dang. Okay, so I finally did get it in. I don't think it's this one because all these edges caught. But anywho, you can get the 450 in. It works out just fine. Thankfully, with that TPU mount. Just be ginger on it. You know, when you're shoving in batteries, don't just shove the battery in. Support the mount. Otherwise, you're either going to tear your nylon screws or you're going to tear the TPU, and then you'll be sad because you'll have to either print a new one or you'll have to find a buddy that's got a printer. And that's the nice thing about this sort of design. It's a positive, in my opinion, because so many people have 3D printers, or you can go to a library or a school or a buddy's house and get a 3D printer, that if you have a different sort of battery that you want to fly with it, you know, just measure it up, and it's a really simple mount down here, so you could fly all sorts of different batteries. Now, a big negative is it has the yaw washout, as you see in the upper right-hand screen. That does happen. It can be anything from mild to severe. It depends on how you're diving, so if you're interested in doing lots of dives, and that is an issue for you, it's something you need to be aware of. It does also come with Betaflight 4.0, and it comes with some PIDs, as I mentioned in the flight footage, but I'll put my PIDs on the screen now. The first set of PIDs that you see are the PIDs that I used for indoor flight on 2S. The PIDs that you're looking at now are for 3S, but those are PIDs from Full Speed. They are not mine, so you should get those on your machine, or you'll get something very similar. I know Rowan's the pilot at Full Speed. I think he also contributes a lot to the designs and the engineering behind these things. He's spent a lot of time flying these. Tuning can be very, very specific to the pilot. And I think at this point, I'm getting pretty picky about my tune. I'm not looking for something in particular like bounce back or something of that nature. I am picky because of the feel on the sticks, the way I fly. I need it to move a certain way when I'm flying, especially inside. There's just so little room for error when I'm flying inside that if it doesn't move like I expect it to move when I move the stick, then I need to make an adjustment. Turtle mode also works quite well, as you might expect. They have the fin on their design. I actually turtle mode outside in the leaves, and it flipped over nice and quickly, and I was able to get out of my neighbor's yard one particular time because I clipped the fence. I had a pretty dramatic crash, and I clipped the fence and then ended up finding it over my neighbor's yard, and instead of going across the fence, I just turtle mode in their yard and flew it back. But that wasn't the only time I turtle mode, but I did turtle mode oftentimes inside the house because I had crashes. I should roll that crash reel so you get a little bit of a feel for the durability. I think if you wanted to see more flight footage, you can go over to Full Speed's website, and you can go to the Full Speed YouTube channel. I'll link that down below. I'll put links to the products down below. You can find, there's one section where I think Rowan's with the HD version comes out of a dive and slams almost dead stop into a tree and just flies away. So I think that's one of the things that we can be somewhat relaxed about in this particular instance, is that the durability should be fairly high. And I'm always trying to quantify that a bit because I don't want somebody flying it in minus 50 degrees and slamming it headfirst into a tree like I've done a few times and then saying, oh, it's not that durable. Well, the colder it gets, the more brittle or fragile the plastics are going to become. And that's something that we have to come to expect to some degree. If you want a quad that it just won't break, I think TBS, don't they make the Obsidian or something like that that they ran over with the car? Maybe that's what you're looking for. There's one out there like that. I think it's waterproof, and it was run over by a car. You know, we're flying these vehicles around in the air. We're doing things. We're getting out of shape sometimes, and we have crashes oftentimes. At least I do. So we do break stuff. So if I had to list the cons, is that it's a little bit on the heavy side. It's actually one of the heavier ones on the market. It's also a little bit wider or bigger, physically bigger. You know, we have those extra millimeters motor to motor. We have a taller stack, if that's a con to you or not. The VTX or the antenna positioning isn't great on the HD version. You might be able to find, you know, some way to get it up back through here. The button to unlock the VTX into all the bands and channels and power is a little bit fussy to get to. It would be nice if we had camera control for the Caddx Turtle, but I don't think that's available yet, so we do have to press that button that's right down in there in order to get that recording. And also we have the Caddx Turtle OSD elements still on screen, so that's going to require you to either have what you need to in order to change that on the Turtle, or you're going to have to acquire that from a friend or through a purchase. We have all sorts of camera angle that we can take. Maybe that's one of the things that if I had to be hypercritical, your camera angle can only go up. Let's see if I could get it to go up that high. So that's, where's that, about 55 degrees, don't you think? Maybe even 65, maybe. So you have a lot of camera angle, but not Matty Stunt's level camera angle. I think the build looks good. You know, a nice bright solder beads there on the top. Again, I don't blame them necessarily for not securing the RX down, but I would do that after you get bound. You don't get any extras, at least that's what I'm being told, is that there's no extras included in the box. So if you want extra props, or if you want extra hoops, or you want extra carbon, you have to place that as an order. Of course, everything is available on Full Speed's website. I'm sure they'll sell through Banggood, GearBust, Good Venture Drones, which again is the official U.S. Supplier. I wouldn't be surprised if we also see it from Grayson Hobbies. Also SNN Hobbies out of Canada. I'm sorry, I sound like I'm plugging all these different places, but this is one of the questions I get a lot about. Where can I get these parts? I don't want to wait for the slow boat, as some people put it. Full Speed does use faster DHL shipping generally, and so you'll get it quicker, but you're also going to have to pay for that shipping, so that's a choice you're going to have to make. Also, something that might interest you, Kebab FPV asked this or mentioned this a couple of videos when we were talking about one of these indoor flyers, is now that we're starting to see motors like these 1103s with connectors, that maybe we're getting towards a point where brushless builds are becoming like brushed builds. So you just plug things in rather than having to solder. We're getting closer at least. So Full Speed's got an 8 amp ESC with connectors. I know Beta FPV has their 10 amp ESCs. I think their ESCs point down, the connectors do, so these point out to the side. Different installations you might need. These wires don't look particularly long, so Bob, if you're asking about these, I don't think they're all that much longer. You can see how much slack I have there between the bell and the connection point. So I think it would be interesting that if a motor manufacturer were to make motors with connectors built into them already, specifically 1102 or 1103 motors, to where we could fly maybe a 2-inch prop on an ultralight build and fly it, you know, without prop guards, to see how that might help bring other people into the hobby. The last thing I should mention, this has been a super long video. I apologize. I'm just trying to cover everything because I don't know how much time I'm going to have for questions with the travels that we've got coming up. Also, the power settings that I used in the video, hopefully I've put that on screen, and I adjusted those up from what Full Speed had them set by default, because I want my batteries at rest to come at 3.5 or very close to 3.55 volts per cell. And so that's what I did with these numbers, and that was safe for running the batteries that I showed you on screen. Hopefully I've covered everything. That's why this video is so long. I wanted to cover as much as possible, show you as much crash reel as I could stand to find together and put together, because I will be traveling, and so I won't be as responsive to your comments and questions probably on this video, or maybe one other video here right before we leave for vacation. So I wanted to make sure that I was trying to be as complete as possible for you. If you have any comments or questions, please go ahead and leave those in the comments section down below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.